The evolution of our species has been eventful to say the least. While some form of semi-bipedal hominids and apes have existed for millions of years, our march toward modern civilization began relatively recently. In a short period of time, our species has gone through many monumental changes that gradually gave shape to everything we see around us today. While some of these crucial historical moments are intuitive and well known, others aren't that obvious. Almost all of them, though, are only apparent in hindsight. Number 8. When we stood up on 2 feet. If we get down to the basics, there aren't that many differences between our closest four-legged ancestors, the intelligent apes. Apart from minor differences and some chance mutations, we may never have been able to stray too far from that lineage. Then some forward-looking ape, or group of them around 2 to 4 million years ago, decided that standing up was a better way to live, and we've not looked back since. The decision to stand up on 2 feet instead of 4 may seem to be insignificant and intuitive to most, though if you think about it, it's an unprecedented trait in the tree of life. Humans are the only creatures that have ever evolved to walk on 2 feet, even if its immediate evolutionary advantages aren't clear to science. Regardless, bipedalism freed our hands to be able to make more complicated tools, setting the stage for everything to come, making it one of the most important steps in the evolution of early humans. Number 7. The domestication of the horse. We have a long history of domesticating animals for our needs. From sheep to cows to dogs, the animal kingdom is full of examples of animals that we have tamed and modified, and that have played important roles in the rise of our civilization. One domesticated species, however, has been so important for humanity that we've written entire books and historical journals on the topic. And that is, of course, the horse. First domesticated sometime around 3000 BC in the Central Asian steppes, the horse initially served as a good source of meat and fur, much like other livestock animals at the time. Soon, however, people realized that it could be used for movement across large distances, like no animal we've ever been able to tame. They may not have realized it at the time, but that realization would become one of humanity's most pivotal. The histories of all the earliest and biggest Eurasian civilizations perfectly coincide with the history of horse domestication in their respective regions. The horse finally allowed us to step out of our limited range and inhabit far-off regions. Not just that, but it also played an important role in the militaries of almost all major armies until the invention of gunpowder. Horse cavalry was often the most powerful unit in major ancient and medieval armies, often deciding the course of a battle entirely on its own. Number 6. The rise of Homo sapiens. Even if most of us may not realize this, humans weren't always the only hominid species on the planet. We're only one of the many different branches of humans to evolve out of intelligent apes, some of whom we may not yet even know about. Moreover, it wasn't always obvious that we'd be the last one standing either. In fact, the exact circumstances that led us to emerge as the ultimate victors of the early hominid race aren't that clear. Neanderthals, for example, were much stronger than our Homo sapien ancestors, and may even have been capable of designing tools as advanced as us. Despite the mystery surrounding our early days, it's clear that the evolutionary domination of Homo sapiens over other hominid species was one of our most crucial early steps. It eliminated the only challenge to our hegemony on the planet, other humans, and directly paved the way for all of the biggest moments in our history since. Number 5. The Age of Revolutions. While most of this video deals with evolutionary and technological developments, the story of humanity is incomplete without its political and cultural milestones. While bigger brains and opposable thumbs gave us the physical tools to win the Darwinian race, our decisions with organizing our society, economy, and politics have been equally influential in shaping up our civilization. In that respect, the events in Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries are perhaps some of the most important in our social history. For the most part, the majority of humanity has lived in rigidly structured hierarchical societies controlled by a handful of people with power. That changed in the 17th century, beginning with the French Revolution, and eventually spread to the rest of Europe and the world. The Industrial Revolution, an important moment in its own right, led to people demanding better rights and living conditions, culminating in the massive revolts seen across European workplaces in the late 17th and 18th centuries, including the colonies. This period laid the foundation for the largely liberal, democratic, and developed part of the world today, where the majority of the population is free from the threat of hunger or conflict. The revolutions, such as the French Revolution, American Revolution, and the 1848 wave of revolutions in Western Europe, triggered the rearrangement of society, economy, and political structure away from feudalism and in favor of the individual, giving way to all of our modern ideas of human rights, liberty, freedom of faith, and so on. Number 4, the Islamic Golden Age. While Europe was the birthplace of some of the biggest social and political changes of the early modern era, the scientific revolution had already happened centuries before in a completely different region of the world. The Golden Age of Islam, from the 7th to the 13th centuries, was when we took the biggest leap forward in our scientific understanding of the world. Some of the earliest versions of most modern fields of science, such as medicine, flight, chemistry, astronomy, etc., first developed in that region thanks to scholars from around the world who were encouraged by the Caliph and other local rulers. This period was so influential that throughout that era, Arabic was the global language of science. That fact is evident in the vestiges of Arabic still found in much of our modern scientific lexicon, for example, algebra, alchemy, algorithm, and so on. Unfortunately, all of that came to an abrupt end with the Mongol siege of Baghdad. Its library, the biggest in the world at the time, was burned to the ground. Regardless, the knowledge we gained from that period set the stage for some of our biggest scientific achievements since, such as the European Age of Exploration, the Industrial Age, and the steam engine. Number 3, the Great Leap Forward. For most people, it would probably come as a surprise that for most of our history, absolutely nothing was happening. Of course, there was that struggle with the other humans we mentioned before, though other than deciding the existential yes-no fate of humanity, it didn't do anything nuanced for the human race. For millions of years, Homo sapiens and other human species had almost no major scientific breakthroughs. That was, however, until something happened around 60,000 years ago, when everything changed. Archaeologists still find clear evidence of a massive leap in tool-making technology, societal structure, language, art, and many other fields around that time, and have called it the Great Leap Forward. It's possible that it may have been thanks to a language-based mutation in our brains at the time, though for all we know for sure, it could have been something random too. What we do know, however, is that the Great Leap Forward is a clear line separating us from the relatively primitive early man and the species that was set to conquer the moon in the distant future. Number 2, writing. While many people would consider the development of language to be a pretty important development in our history, it absolutely is, it's difficult to decide on a singular definition of language. Many ancient cultures communicated with systems of language that would barely be recognizable to us today, but fulfilled all of the criteria for what a language is supposed to be. People have been using some form of language to talk to each other for as long as we can remember. Writing, however, can be considered to be a clear marker, as we can precisely tell when and where it first originated. It independently arose at different points in history in the Near East, China, and Mesoamerica. All writing systems of today trace their roots to those first languages, as well as most cultures. Writing gave us a boost to human progress like nothing else, allowing for the first time in our history to reliably record, manipulate, store, and disseminate information. For example, generals could now write down the details of their battles, allowing future commanders to use that information in their own battles. Rulers could reliably send out their edicts without the risk of manipulation, and so on. Writing provided us with a way to use information like never before and formed the basis for all of history's most influential civilizations. Number 1, the Agricultural Revolution. Many historians and archaeologists take the view that the decision to settle down into farming societies, as opposed to hunter-gatherer bands, was an obvious next step in human evolution. The early farmers, though, would have had to undergo many massive changes in their everyday lives, like in diet, housing, societal structure, etc., to stick to their new lifestyle. It wasn't a clearly beneficial deal, and more experts are starting to question why we did it at all. Its evolutionary benefits notwithstanding, the agricultural revolution was still a pivotal moment in human history. Because of farming, we could finally live longer, grow our population, and most importantly, free a large part of the population from food production. Experts in other fields, like artists, bureaucrats, philosophers, military generals, gave way to even bigger, more successful civilizations, directly influencing how societies are structured even today. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below and do not forget to subscribe. Brand new videos just like this every day of the week. And as always, thank you for watching.